live. It is officially now the end of the afternoon sessions with the roundtable on day 4 of Gateway X. I'm joined by a great crowd tonight. The topic of discussion is layout design and operations. We were going to have a separate operations one, but we decided to have a virtual banquet instead, just so we can see everybody eating their dinner while watching a clinic. Why not? We have a banquet at a normal convention, so we'll have one at our convention too. So, joined by a great crowd of people today who've given clinics on NMRAX or who are world famous due to their digital transformation of their SIG. So we're joined by Eric Smith, who is the Secretary of OpSig, unless you've just changed your role at the recent meeting.
I'm just on the board.
Just on the board now?
Yep.
Not the secretary, just the board. He's a board member of OpSig.
Yep.
Roles changed, AGM happened. We've got Dave Berman, our expert on grain and River Rail's Ops group member. We have Dan Munson, also wearing his River Rail Ops top there, out in Kansas City. There we go, very proudly wearing that. And we have Randy Hamill on the East Coast, the expert on all things New Haven, who knows even more than Chris Adams. If that such a thing could be possible, that's what we have. So great group of people. And what we'll do is the standard roundtable format that you've now become familiar with and you all love. Gordy will ask some preset questions. The panel will answer them to the best they can. We'll go over to Facebook in a wee while, so you've still got a chance to put some posts as comments underneath the post that I put on. Share your layout design tips, tricks, and plans, and we'll review those, and then we'll go to questions that are in the YouTube or Facebook chat. So ask questions as we go. Brad in Australia is turning the questions round so that they read the right way round for Australia for him, and he'll be asking all those questions at the end. So first question. What's more important to you? Layout design, operations, or both? And we'll go to Randy first.
I'm gonna have to say both, because I think the layout has to be designed well for operations. Since I'm modeling based on the prototype and my track plan follows the prototype very, very closely, I didn't have to worry too much about that aspect of it, but I still do have to fit it in the space that I've got to work with, and so you do have to do some work to make that arrangement fit. But it was all done for operations specifically. That's kind of one of the two key things that I'm designing this layout for.
Don?
Exactly. It's both of them are overlapping. You can't have one without the other. If you're designing a model railroad to operate, they're overlapping. You do it all at the same time. You draw from key elements from both, because you're trying to make your layout fit in a design space and to operate or model the operation that you wish to recreate. So it goes hand in hand.
Dave?
Yeah, I hate to say I have to agree. One does not preclude the other. Layout design, if you're going to do a switching district, what kind of operations are going into it? When I look at a prototype track plan, I say, why did they design it this way? And what can I do to selectively compress it? And then how am I going to operate this? Is this a single switch engine job? Is it something the local's going to do in a town? All things that are going to be part of that operations plan. So you can't really get one without the other.
Eric?
Yeah, I'll agree with what they're saying. I think, if you're modeling a specific prototype, there's always a compression aspect to it. In my case, I was proto-lancing. I knew kind of what I was going to model, but it was all about the space and obvious focus on operations and saying, okay, how can I make this interesting to operate? How can I do things to, if I'm having switching districts, okay, well, I can't have, if I've got them stacked, one on a lower level, one on an upper level, well, I'm going to have to arrange the train so that I don't have two people standing on top of each other. My main yard is fairly lengthy. I can't put something above the main yard because I don't want people reaching over the main yard to get to things. I think you need to think about that sort of stuff as you're designing, no matter what what model you're following, whether you're a specific prototype, proto-lancing, freelancing, whatever you want to call it. I think you really need to take that into account as you're putting your design together.
That's cool. Okay, this should be a very simple, very quick question. We'll quickly go around the room just to base it. I want a single, simple answer, okay? And it's, what is your preference? Prototype, proto-freelance, or freelance completely? And we'll go the opposite way around. We'll go to Eric first.
Okay, so what were they? It was prototype.
So it's prototype,
freelance.
proto-freelance, or completely freelance. So prototype would be exactly depicting the exact track plan, exactly mimicking the prototype. Proto-freelance would be, for example, modeling the Santa Fe, but making up your own. Can we go Randy, Eric, Dave, Dan?
Yep.
Yeah, okay, no, we're not. So, and then freelance would be completely nondescript.
My personal preference is the proto-lancing or proto-freelancing. In my case, I happen to like the Canadian Pacific and BNSF, but I don't like the orange scheme. So my railroad won't have the orange scheme engines. I know. I like the old scheme. I've made some of the decisions are based on space. I can't model 2 main lines, so we're just going to kind of squish them together and make one. So I think it gives you some flexibility, lets you use commercial products. And honestly, anymore, you can put whatever engines together that you want in a modern railroad, because I got pictures of them all. So proto-lancing for me.
Dave?
I like all three of them. If I'm up, I don't know if I'm cutting
done.
in line, but
No,
I like
it's all right. You're cutting in.
I like them all, to be honest. Proto-lancing is probably my favorite. That's what my last railroad was, and that's what my next railroad will probably be, because I like being able to base it on a prototype, but understand that I can't do everything prototypically. You know, I think, and those that do model it beautifully prototypically, Steve Brulos's Milwaukee Road is a good example up in La Crosse. I'm sorry to quote La Crosse there. That's a beautiful example. He was able to, he nailed it. Freelancing, another thing that I tried when I was younger, try to create my own railroad. I still have yearnings to do that every once in a while, and I may end up going back to that in a few years. Who knows? But the Ron Kofer's Lake Erie Southern, the Maumee, there's a bunch of them out there that are great freelances that bring in the different parts of the prototype that they enjoy and encompass that in their railroad. So sorry, I can't give you a one-word answer on that one.
That's all right. We'll go to Dave now.
Well, I'm a prototype modeler from way back, but anytime you're building a railroad, you're probably proto-freelancing a little bit. I'm currently building the modern day Twin Cities. There'll be a lot of scenes that people will recognize, but I can't get in the 13 miles of railroad basically that I'm modeling. I can't possibly model it all. You'd go nuts. The other thing is there aren't as many switching opportunities. Modern day railroads don't switch as many industries. So I have to flex a little bit. So I'm going to kind of say proto-freelance at this point.
Okay, this will be an interesting compromise. Randy?
Prototype.
Yeah, I think we got that from your clinics in the past. Okay, cool. Okay, so what one piece of advice, one single piece of advice would you give to somebody who was currently still designing and planning their dream model railroad? Who wants to take that first?
Me?
Yeah,
one?
You can go.
One?
One piece of advice.
Design the railroad to fit in the space you've got. And just to expand on that, you don't necessarily draw out the track plan. I don't necessarily draw out the track plan when I do that. I make the railroad fit the way I want it to fit with the aisles and maybe a rough idea of where I think I'm going to have switching areas, yards, so on and so forth. But make the diagram, the bench work, maybe that's a better term, make the bench work fit the space you're in, then start plugging in all of your wants and needs in terms of track plan.
That's a great piece of advice. That's exactly how I do it as well. That's exactly what I do. But I draw a overhead diagram, and if you're doing multi-deck, you need to draw a diagram looking straight at the wall as well, so you can see that you're not one above the other. Okay, who wants to go next? One piece of advice, Randy.
Real simple. Visit or study as many layouts as you possibly can. Ideally, go and operate on as many as you can before you start building bench work. Because you will learn so much from the way other people have done it. You'll learn things you like, things you don't like, and that doesn't necessarily mean they're bad. They're just not what you want for your railroad. And mostly you'll just learn more about it as much as I read before, as much as I saw in videos or talked to people, it was different just actually doing it and running railroads and operating on different layouts.
Yep, spot that. Dave?
Don't be afraid to change. I'm building this railroad for the second time in a new area with a lot more space this time. And the first one I built, we changed the track plan often enough that there were places we rebuilt a couple of times. Ron mentioned the Lake Erie and Southern and Ron Kofer. I've watched him change switches 2 days before an operating session to try something a little bit different. Maybe throw the crews a curve if nothing else. But the idea being is once you get started, you're going to learn things as you go along the way. What works better here? What worked better here that might work in another location? I talked to somebody from the prototype. They told me they switched this way. Don't be afraid to change up as you go along.
That's cool. Nice advice. Eric?
Agree with what they said, but my big thing is at some point you got to start cutting lumber. The whole designing forever, trying to make you're never going to get it perfect. At some point, figure out what you can put into the space. As I think Dan said, you can figure out specific tracks later, but at some point you got to start cutting lumber, and things will fall into place after that. You may have to redesign, you may have to replace the thing that you'd screwed up the first time. Did that last weekend. But don't get stuck in analysis paralysis, as we call it. So,
well said.
Yep.
Cool. Okay, so what do you use or what did you use to design your model railroad? Your track plan and scenery.
I'll say that I designed my main yard using SCARM, just because it is a fairly complex yard with, all of the arrival departures and the leads and all that. But the rest of the layout, it was more what Dan was saying of designing the space and then just sort of winging it, especially switching districts. It was like, I think Randy said, visit lots of layouts, see what they're doing. I mean, it took forever to figure out exactly how I wanted to lay out. And it's like, okay, well, take a little bit from here, a little bit from here, and then come up with something that will be interesting to switch. There's no prototype for it. It's just, can you get cars in there? Can you get, will it be interesting to operate? So,
I can't agree with Eric more. He nailed it. Get in there and get it done. You can get the paralysis. Don't start putting bench work up. And as everybody knows, or maybe we don't talk about enough, it's very easy to tear it down and start over, or tear down a section and start over. And don't be afraid to do that, because every time you do that, you learn. Yep. Every time you do it, you learn.
I think the other thing is, sorry, go ahead, Dan.
No, go ahead.
The other thing that we talk about in a lot of things is you get anchored to some idea that you had. That, well, I know it has to be this way. It has to be this way. At some point, you can say, does it really have to be that way? Can we maybe tweak it? Can we? You got to be open to new ideas, as Randy was saying, going and seeing layouts. I saw a long time ago, actually, at several layouts where there had a 18-inch or 20-inch high branch line. You had to sit in a chair to operate it, and that idea just sort of gets filed back there. And then I was at an operating session. I think my dad was over, and he simply can't stand up. It's like, wait a minute. I may be relatively young here, but what if if I put in this branch line, wired it up? Well, not only did that just add an extra 100 feet of operations, I've just made it more accessible for people who can't who can't stand on concrete for long periods of time. So it's like, I think Disney said it best, no idea ever gets thrown out. There's always those ideas that you happen to just, maybe you played with them, you saw them on a layout, you saw them on a tour. Keep pictures, keep hundreds of pictures of stuff. You might eventually need it. And it's like, ooh, wait, I saw that switching district on so-and-so's layout at Prairie Rail. Ooh, I can take something from that, tweak it a little bit, and use it on my layout. So
yeah,
I think your question was about how did you design it?
It was how you designed it. We went off down a hole, but it's fine because I just want to admit that I have a folder on my laptop that says track design ideas, and track planning inspiration is another folder that I have, and I just throw all kinds of pictures into there or designs I've taken as I've been going around on tours.
Yep. I think the SCARM file I have is so woefully out of date compared to reality, but it did help me at least size. It was for the yard in particular. The rest of it, I'm just winging it. It's like I know kind of the form that I want. I know the form that will fit in the space, and the track plan, I'll just wing it. So.
Okay. Randy?
Yep. So mine is a mix of really rough sketches, which I had done many, many, many times. And in fact, I've got a bunch for a layout that I thought I was going to build because I thought we were moving. But mostly it's just to get an idea as to whether the track that I'm thinking of putting there is going to fit. Since I'm modeling prototypically, I use Sanborn maps, valuation maps, other maps I could get, aerial photographs, and so on to identify what I was trying to put in the space. And then the other big key is that I love using microengineering track because microengineering flex track will hold its shape after you put it down. So the track doesn't have to be attached to your bench work until you've had the time to test it, tweak it, move it around and stuff. So I still have track that I laid 10 years ago that's not attached yet, that I'm finally getting to the point where it's going to be finalized. But I had a layout prior to this. Actually, it was pictured in the clinic that was run earlier today, and that was on masonite spline. That was never attached to the spline. It was just sitting right on top of 3/4 inch wide spline, and I ran it for probably close to a year before I started building this one. So having the ability to make those changes as you go, and I mentioned earlier today too that I have ended up changing the layout. As much as I followed the prototype as closely as I could, I found over time that I could do closer, and I've rearranged portions of this section of the layout 3 times, I think, for Stanley Works. And now it's much closer to what I was trying to do the first place, and I just didn't think was possible. So, you figure things out as you go.
Dave, what do you use?
Well, I'm learning to be a new CAD guy, but I'm pretty much old school still. I still like to draw. I was trained to be a photographer and graphic artist in college, so I still have a wonderful drafting table. With a great drafting machine, I draw everything out, get it as close as I can, and then I go to the paper doll school of track planning, where I photocopy components and I'll lay them out on the bench work.
Mm-hmm.
Does it fit? Does it look good? And then I'll get to the point of, okay, let's put the track down, let's get the roadbed in, let's see what we're going to do here. And then I'm pretty much rolling. But like Randy and everybody else, I'm looking at the prototype, and I'm lucky that I have friends in the railroad industry that can sometimes get me a yard map or get me a track plan, get me a click book. I always have these around for railroads that I don't even model, just because I see things in there. Wow, that's a neat way of a neat tank car industry, or that's a neat covered hopper industry. So I find a lot of things like that. So I'm drawing, I'm looking, always finding something, trying to see if I can make it fit and fit into the railroad.
Cool. Okay, we're going to move a little bit away from layout design. So sorry, layout design aficionados out there. We're going to move slightly away towards operations. And the question could be controversial question to start us off with, but I like controversy. It's my middle name. Remote remote operations, are they a fad or are they here to stay?
I'll start. I watch Dave Abiley's clinics, and I've watched him. I think I'm not good at pronouncing his name. If I screwed that up, I apologize profusely. And we kind of took that a little bit and ran with it just a little bit. Tim Otenhoven and Tim is doing clinics on car ferries and 3D printing, but Tim is all over the place in ideas that he wants to try. I live approximately 120 miles away from him. I have operated his railroad through his Wi-Fi system via a VLAN using Wii Throttle and a Wi-Fi remote camera. And what we do is he doesn't have signals on it yet, so he brings up the signal panel. That's on one laptop. I have the camera on the other, and I'm using my phone to operate. Is it perfect? Now, is it the best way to operate his railroad? No, but I'm confined to quarters. I don't get out of here. So obviously that's the only game that I have to play in town. But I will tell you one thing. We did it in River Rail when Ron Kofer's LENS ran as a timetable train order layout. The dispatcher often dispatched from Minneapolis, dictating train orders to an operator via a telephone. And he would OS back and forth. We had a live line that was constantly moving back and forth. The railroad didn't run any different than having the regular TT and TO dispatchers. That railroad has since gone to CTC. I'm wagering a pretty good guess some of these CTC boards we could sync in via a VLAN or something like that and probably run remotely. So I don't think it's a fad. I think it's a chance for getting other people involved in some of our railroads.
Yeah, I think on a upcoming, there's another guy out in Virginia that I knew from when I lived there named Bob Rodriguez, who has the Nickel City lines. And compared to, and I saw Dave's setup. Bob has gone several steps further in terms of number of cameras, as well as having I think he's using OBS to basically turn his dispatch panel into 6 sections that constantly are in like a loop. So you're constantly seeing where things are. Plus I think he's got 8 or 9 cameras now that are accessible. I would agree with Dave. I think the idea of having a remote dispatcher is absolutely a great idea. In my my basement, I was looking at the amount of space I had allocated for a dispatcher desk. I'm like, you know what? I can just put the dispatcher upstairs, and they've got all sorts of space. And it, especially in the same house, I think it does. There's a few things I've tried it. I set up 3 or 4 remote old cell phones around the layout. You absolutely have to have absolutely perfect track work, absolutely perfectly running trains. And for every train operator, you've got to have at least one pair of boots on the ground to go around. And, it's simply impossible to do switching. On Bob's layout, I was running a passenger train that all I had to do is move around the layout, stop at various locations. And I think that would work perfectly. Depending on the size of your layout, you need a ton of cameras, or you need to put them at an angle so that you can see a huge swath of the layout. Because putting them trackside, you get, 5 to 10 feet of view. I think I think the fascinating thing about it is it's one of those things that had we not had this pandemic where we're all stuck in our own houses, we might not have tried it. I think a lot of this may have been out of, sort of necessity. The idea of the remote dispatcher, I think that's probably the easiest to do, simply because between Zoom and a little convoluted, FRS interface, you can easily put a dispatcher remote, either with TeamViewer or a remote desktop or whatever. That's easy. Operators, I think if I was going to do it on my layout, I'd have to have a whole ton of cameras, and those operators would be running my wave rates, the things that are not, they're just following the signals and just moving forward. I think anything more than that, I think it might ruin the experience.
I'll jump in, and I was going to say, I'm glad one of you guys went first, because I was going to talk about RCO operations and the prototype. So I'm glad you guys clarified that for me. I will tell you that I'm very fascinated by the idea of dispatching. I think that's awesome. It creates a great opportunity for people that can attend or maybe limited due to physical ability to get to a basement or to a session. And you may have some really, really good dispatchers in Minneapolis or Phoenix or wherever they might be, and you want to have them part of your regular session. And I believe it was Gary Peterson with his Salt Lake Southern has tried a couple of times with a laptop, dispatching off a laptop, and he said he's had some pretty good success with that. I've seen a little bit of this, you're running a train from your phone around somebody else's railroad. I kind of agree with Eric. It's something that it's really challenging to do, especially if you're switching. Now, take a step back. Could you have somebody there acting as the conductor, and there's ways to have communication between that person who's there and the engineer who's running it? That makes it pretty prototype. The engineer's stuck in a cab, and all his view is out the front, and maybe luckily if he spins around, he can look out back. You can recreate that and have good communication with a guy in the field that can, if you will, grab something if something goes awry. I think that'd be a pretty awesome thing to try.
Randy?
Sure. Yeah, I think that certainly remote dispatching has been done for a while. It's and not unprototypical either for a lot of railroads, obviously, or for pretty much any of them. It's always been a remote thing. If you're going to try operating a train itself, I like the idea of a camera that's you're out the front view. If you're going to be an engineer, it's not something I've tried, but it certainly would be very interesting to try. It's not going to be something that would work well on my particular layout. It's all switching. It's too much interaction, I think. And for me, the big thing is more that part of the whole reason why I love operating the layout is getting together with a bunch of friends and having a good time together. And I'll quote Robert Fripp, guitarist of King Crimson. He says a CD is kind of like a love letter, and it's something you can treasure and enjoy, but a live show is like a hot date. It's much better to see the person in person than it is to have to listen to a CD or read a love letter and something. And so I would miss that interaction if I wasn't, able. I certainly would love to do it if that's the only way I can participate, but I definitely prefer that in-person operation.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I was talking about this with somebody else, is the fact that especially as we age, social interaction is absolutely critical to keeping brains functioning properly. Mm-hmm. You get social interaction, we'll call them switching puzzles, even though I don't like that term, but the idea of that logic of, okay, what do I have to move? You're interacting with it's a good time. And I miss getting to do it in person. I've done it a few times here locally with a mask on, but I really miss getting to see the other layouts around the country.
Yep.
Yeah.
Amen.
Getting to that people interaction thing. Yeah, that's what, if you had to say, what am I missing about being isolated? We get together on Zoom every Thursday night in the River Rail group, and it's good, but it's not the same thing as running a train into a yard and having to have it worked and talking and going back and forth. Yeah, I can run at a distance. If I'm interacting with a conductor, I've got that ability too, and that's extremely important. But it's still not the same thing as seeing 20 guys, 12 guys, 8 guys, 4 guys, whatever size your operator is, get together and make a railroad sing. And that's the cool part of it.
Yep.
Okay, so I have a slightly different take on this, for obvious reasons that I live on an island with 400 people, and I, as of yesterday, discovered the only other known model railroader on my island, Terry, who lives 100 meters from my house thanks to NMREX. But to give you an idea of size, the telephone exchange on our island is 7316. His house is number 15. So his phone number ends 15. So it's 731615. That's his phone number, okay? Locally. My phone number is 7316558, and that's the most recent. That is the most recent house built in the village. So his house had telephones when the first telephone exchange went in the village. So there's not many people here. So my layout is designed for remote operations from the very beginning. And I think it's going to be. I don't think it's a fad. I think it's here to stay. I think there's positions that you can do. I agree with you guys. All dispatching's done remotely now on the real railroad. Anyway, it always has been. You've never had the dispatchers being able to see exactly where the train is. So it's actually more prototypical, and a lot of people try to put the dispatcher out of the room anyway.
Yeah. I think the other thing that you have now is the fact that the technology is caught up.
Yes.
The fact that you're in the middle of nowhere, and I've got a perfectly good screenshot of you along with 3 other people running off of, pretty much standard cable. Imagine trying to do this even 5 years ago. It would have been impossible. So I think the technology has gotten there in terms of video conferencing, bandwidth, all of that, all had to be in place for this to work, the way we're doing it right now. So
yeah, timetable and train order you could always do remotely, because that never had, other than operators OSing in, the dispatcher did everything by the reports on the railroad and assuming that everybody followed their orders properly, which in model railroading is sometimes questionable. But there's other options, like at Chris's layout, we've kind of joked around. He has a it's not really a dispatcher, but he controls all the mainline switches on the Saybrook section of the layout. And he's essentially the tower operator. And there's a closet that we've talked about, probably mostly me pushing him to move the desk into the closet and put a little cameras into the tower that's there on the layout, and then we can put a couple TVs, frame them up so they look like windows, and it looks like you're looking right at the tower at the layout and the things that are operating. And there's really no reason why that tower position couldn't be hundreds of miles away, provided he built, or whoever's building their layouts designs the layout to operate remotely like that. It does require a different setup than just a regular layout, obviously.
And
I think that was what I was just trying to bring it round to. I'll go to you, Dave. I was just trying to bring it round to that, is that trying to retrofit remote operations into an existing layout is difficult. Dave Abeley's key thing is his key difficulty that he's coming across now is a lack of block detection. He didn't put enough block detection into his layout to enable you to see where your train is without having a camera. So the advantage I've got is that I've designed the layout based on having 6 family members in Orkney that might be daft enough to actually stand in a room and be the conductor. So I know I've only got 3 switching jobs on my entire layout, but there's 20 different jobs that there could be, 6 in the room, 14 out. And actually what it's enabled me to do is put a bigger layout in a smaller space, because I can go more vertical and I don't really have to worry about congestion.
Yep.
So there are advantages to it. I think it'll be interesting to see how it develops over the next 2 years. We'll go to Dave, and then we'll go to Facebook.
Yeah, and then
we'll go to Eric.
You were talking about putting a camera in your dispatch office. I don't know if you can see this or not. This is from Dr. Jerry Alber's layout that he does the Virginian, or the Deepwater District. This is actually in the dispatch room. There's a piece of track running through here, with the trains running on it, as sort of the dispatcher's view of the railroad, so to speak. I thought that was a real clever way to put those together.
Yep.
And kind of riffing on the technology thing, we're just at a really, really young point with Wi-Fi throttles. And that's something I'm hoping to see. But with all the things that JMRI can do, We know that we're getting smaller and smaller wireless video cameras, potentially that could land in a cab. I think we're getting closer and closer all the time.
There's
Now,
some German options that are about $100 extra for Roku. So
yeah, and I think slowly but surely we're going to get that piece of the project caught up, and then we can put an engineer from anywhere. We're going to have a conductor on the railroad that's going to do the switching, because we haven't figured out how to uncouple well yet, or even see where we're backing into what are the switch positions. Signaling, block detection, we're already there in a lot of cases. Train ID is a little bit messy yet. We've got a few things going on there, but we're really starting to get close, I think.
Yeah. Think just one more thing I want to piggyback on. Think about if you've ever had operators at a railroad that go a little too fast.
Mhm.
Now put them in that engineer's seat remotely. You don't think that's going to slow them down? You don't think they're now going to creep up on those
May not.
signals? I don't know. It's to me it would be fascinating. Give me one of those nice big proto throttles. I'll sit in my basement and I've got a view of just I'm going back and forth.
Yeah.
I'm going to creep up on stuff. I'm going to take it nice and easy because you know what? If I screw up, you know, I'm not there to get chewed out and
Exactly.
tearing stuff up. I don't want to do it.
especially coming around that corner where the signal is right around the turn that you can't quite see it.
Yep.
Oh dear.
I'll give you a hint. When you're watching through a remote camera, you slow down.
Yeah, do you?
I'll get Tim telling me, goes, "You're really creeping," and I'm looking at the camera and going, "Feels fast enough to me." Compression is
Okay,
when you're going across.
Guys, we're gonna go to Facebook. We gotta go to Facebook, or
Sure.
we're gonna run out of time. So we're gonna go to Facebook. Again, as I've said on the last 4 occasions, apologies that this is my personal Facebook, and you're seeing the screen as I see it. So if there's anything that pops up on notifications, it's a personal account. So today it's layout design was today's theme. Thanks to Pam for doing the artwork for us. And so bits of advice, Dan. Kind of echoing a few things that we've said, but yeah, we spoke to this on Monday about don't get impatient, because if you just do a spur and a loop and a spur, it's going to get boring and you're going to want to expand it. So always think about where the end game is and take the time to do some planning, but analysis paralysis, always be wary of that.
Mm-hmm.
Lloyd's been and done as John, well, it's actually Lloyd from Canada, has done a few clinics for us here, and he says that he never had a train when he was young, but he was on a train when he was 2 years old, and so he needed all the help he could get, and he got a track plan designed by a professional track planner. So this is what you would look like if you had your layout designed with a professional plan. And there are services out there to design your layout. This looks like it's done in any rail. And so you can see the level of detail that you get. I think if you use something like AnyRail, and there are other digital software out there, you can actually print this out 1-to-1 scale and put this down on the benchwork and put the turnouts and the track directly onto the plan. So there are advantages of doing it digitally. But that's Lloyd's first layout. Guys, so it's pretty epic. We've seen some good footage of it, and we've had a layout tour around it. It's really good. So thank you for sharing that. However, if you want to see something that's really not a professional job, you can see my attempt at a very in progress track plan. This is the other levels from my clinic we just did. This is how we're getting. Dan mentioned this before, as you start with the bench work and you work your way down. So this is just with the track down. There's no scenery. We've not worked out where the buildings are or anything like that. One of the things you can see on this track plan I'm not too pleased about at the moment is the closeness of that rail to the edge, given that this is a shelf layout and that's going to be 120 centimeters. So for the Americans in the room, 4 feet off the deck. Scale trains locomotives from 4 feet turn to kits very quickly onto a stone floor. So that's still a work in progress, but this is the kind of thing that as you develop the track plan, eventually that'll look something similar to Lloyd's. It's in the same software. we don't need to go through the entire layout. But if you want to see beyond my clinic what the other 4 decks look like of my layout, you can, and you can see my crazy helix, one helix above another, double helix.
It's helixception.
Mm-hmm.
It's helixception, yeah. So it's between deck. I'll show you what it looks like. This is what we're going to do on my layout. This is what's a bit crazy. We're going to take this. This is actually in real life a triangle, a Y junction.
Yeah.
But we're going to just take 2 legs of it off. The helix will go down. The helix will go up. One on top of the other on top of the threaded bar.
Yeah, that's how Bill
So-
Snyder's layout, his old layout was designed. He had a single helix and he had 2 levels of operation plus a level of staging above, all coming off the same helix.
Yeah, so that's helix 2 and helix 3, Randy, on my layout. There's 5 helixes in total.
Oh, you got 5. I only have 2.
Yeah, that's enough. Although we'll have a look at the helix in a second because I've been building it this evening while we've been doing this. So here's Art Roberts' design. 22-inch radius to accommodate articulated locomotives. Number 7s, number 5s. So lots of all requirements. So this is a great list of givens and drovers that you really need to do the givens and drovers list. I think before you cut, Eric, as much as you want to go into cutting lumber, I have a vision of you with a chainsaw at the end. Like, I'm going to tear that section of my layout down. Okay, I have that vision in my head now. Maybe we'll do that on Zoom one night. You can just have us cutting out bits of your layout.
No, I had a lot of this. It was a rework for reliability and operational. When I was in Minnesota, the old hobby shop that I used to sell or buy tons of stuff had a double crossover, and that solved a whole bunch of engineering issues with my staging yard. So it was just some rework. I don't even own a chainsaw, but
Okay,
It's a skill saw. You used a skill saw.
So givens and drovers are important, though. We think we can all kind of agree on that. Okay, we'll go to David and then we'll come to me. David, I don't know why you've got this map of Scotland. That's a bit of a big place to build a layout.
That's a lot of real estate. You can get a lot of stuff done.
That's a lot of layout. You know, don't believe these things.
He's doing 1-to-1 scale too. So
yeah,
Awesome.
The square foot of Scotland that you can buy and become a supposed laird, an American aristocrat of Scotland, doesn't really get you enough real estate there to build a huge thing. You know. Yeah, so all hail. So David, though, has used SketchUp to design his layout here, which is a novel way of doing it. I've not seen someone do SketchUp, but of course it gives you a nice 3D design. So that's good. And then here we go, Helix 1. So this was 3 hours ago. I've done a clinic. We're an hour and 44 minutes into the whole roundtable and everything and doing the clinic. And just people get scared about helixes and how difficult a helix is. So here is the helix finished, ready for installation on the layout. So helixes are not something to be scared of.
It's a model of a helix.
It's a model of a helix. It's N scale. And the question is going to be, can Gordy fit in the helix? Yeah, there you go. It's Gordy from the bottom of the helix.
Gordy wants to be speed. He really
That
does.
looks like a good way to take the distance. You could walk around town with that.
I could, yeah, I could, yeah.
Gordy, you got to
It's a whole
start
new hat.
out with speed, man.
So speed at the bottom of the helix is dangerous. So that was our post from Facebook for the day. So what questions did we get?
Okay, there's only a couple of questions in the chat at the moment, but the first one is from David. Can someone explain remote ops a little bit more in depth of what's going on there with remote ops?
Eric, we'll go to Eric.
Sure. There's a couple things involved. One, for the most part, you need to have a layout that is connected up with JMRI. That is really the only I would say that's really the only viable solution right now. I think you could do something with proto throttles if you've got, because I think proto throttles are Wi-Fi, if I'm not mistaken. So you would need to do a little networking voodoo to open up ports and so on so that a remote proto throttle could connect. But most people are using either Engine Driver on Android or WeThrottle on an iOS devices, Apple devices. Those connect into your computer, your JMRI computer, which then is able to control trains. So, I mean, I walk down to my basement, I fire up JMRI, fire up Engine Driver on my phone, I'm good to go. For somebody remote, well, yeah, they can drive the train, but they can't see jack. So now you've got to work up either some sort of remote camera, so you can see either, as Dave was talking about, the idea of that camera in the train. Those are pretty rare right now. Most people are putting up webcams in key locations around the layout, and or giving you a way to see, especially if you're doing block detection and signaling, some sort of a remote view using something like TeamViewer, Zoom, or whatever, so you can see the dispatch panel. And as long as you can remember where your train was, you can see it moving along the layout. So it's a combination of existing software with JMRI to control the train, as well as communications with people who are in the train room, as well as some cameras to let you see where you're going. There are some really great, if you go out to and we'll plug opsig.org/virtual. If you go out there and look at the past sessions, there are several sessions where we have seen how to do this live. Dave did one. There's one coming up in a couple of weeks with Bob Rodriguez, who's doing it with lots of cameras. But those are really the key components. I mean, there's some picky details along with it, but that's sort of the bulk of it.
Yeah, and here at
and then,
NMREX,
sorry, one other thing would be the remote dispatcher. That's another thing that can be done. But
it's remote operations is basically people doing a job on the layout during an op session that's not where they're not physically located in the layout room. So even having a dispatcher in a different part of the house is technically remote, because unless they're connected by an Ethernet, very long Ethernet cable to the layout. So yeah, NMREX team has taken us on board that this is an area that people are very interested in. We'll be doing another NMREX event in September, and that event in September will have a lot of remote operations theme around it. We'll be working with various people, including Dave Abeleys and a few other people that we mentioned tonight, to really explain the digital transformation in that space that's taken place in the last 6 months. So we're just going to wait till September to do it, to line it up and then theme a whole event around it. So yeah, watch this space, David. We'll have more for you there. Go on, Brad. Next question.
Okay, so obviously it's pretty around this remote ops thing. Andy's asked, what bandwidth are we going to need to be running Wi-Fi cameras, locos, CCTV, Skype, TeamViewer, and multiple engineers all logged in at once? Is that going to be our limitation?
Well, your bandwidth will always be a limit. Your upload will be the limitation, but you don't need to run all that. You genuinely don't need to run all that. What you need to decide is what do you need to run. You don't need to run TeamViewer and all those kind of things. You can put these things out through a website that would make it very low bandwidth. In terms of cameras, if you use webcams and HD cameras, they're going to consume a high amount of bandwidth. So you want to look to use lower quality cameras, but not so low quality that you can't see the signals and you can't see the track. But you don't need to run the best quality cameras that we would use for video conferencing to do this. So that's kind of the best advice. We'll go down to Dave, who is a computer man. He can probably give you some better advice than that. But
okay, to do what we were doing, we've done it a couple of different ways. Literally, we've managed to do it within either a Zoom call or Google Hangouts. And what we do is we Wi-Fi the cameras to a device, and the cameras we have are just little cubes. They're about the size, smaller than a golf ball, that you can put on a flat car. Tim actually 3D printed a car to put the camera on, and there's no connection at all. They're good for about an hour and a half of battery time. It goes in as one of the cameras that we have available to us on the Zoom call. And then you're just clicking the camera. Somebody's playing switcher operator, if you know anything about television production. And then you also put up the dispatcher's panel. And we've managed to do this on his home Wi-Fi, which is probably the average home Wi-Fi, decent. You're not going to do it on dial-up, forget it. If you have the lower bandwidth Wi-Fi coming into your house, lower bandwidth, you might have a little bit of a problem with the video quality, but it's shockingly amazing what you can do.
Yeah, because you have to remember that you've got one connection going out. You're connecting all those to a single computer, and it's only that one computer feed you're uploading. You're not uploading 20 cameras as separate feeds consuming bandwidth. It's all being consolidated into one stream that's going up.
Right. The thing I'll throw out is in case you're not aware, the idea that you have way more incoming bandwidth than you do outgoing. So a site that you need to, if you're looking to do this, speedtest.net is sort of the industry standard for testing your speed. That will give you a downstream, meaning you downloading stuff to your location, and then an upload speed. For everything we're talking about, the upload speed is the critical number. If you're seeing something like 1 megabit, it's probably not even worth trying to do it. You're just not, the experience for the operator, especially somebody running your $1,000 steam engine via remote throttle, who suddenly is trying to hit stop and it's not responding. Yeah, no, that's it's going to be a bad day.
But we have tested this with the Australians and the Brits, okay, and I have 18 megabits per second upload speed. I can operate Brad's layout. I can hit the horn, and it's pretty much instant. Not so long ago, there used to be a 200 millisecond lag between Australia and the UK, so it would take 400 milliseconds for that to work, 200 milliseconds for the horn to blow, and that to come back. And if you think about the technology where that's going through, that's all great. But if you think you're going to have a camera and you're going to run 40 trains and you're going to have 40 webcams on 40 trains on flat cars, it's not the way it needs to be done. It's just not the way it needs to be done. But we could do a whole clinic on that, so we're going to park that there, guys, because there will be clinics on all the aspects of this coming up in September. So let's park that there. Brad, next question.
Okay, the only other question I've got here is Doug's asked, what's the radius designed on your Helix, Gordy? What's the size of it?
Okay. So this Helix, this one, the smallest Helix number 1, is an 11-inch radius Helix. You can put a tighter radius on the inside. It's not ideal. It's there because I'm space compromised. All my other Helixes will be 16.5-inch radius, and I'm modeling N scale, I suppose I should say that. But because it's plywood and it's all CNC machined, it actually automatically super elevating itself within the Helix. So I can get away with a tighter radius, but it should be noted I'm only running 4-axle locos, so it's a 3.5% grade, an 11-inch radius, so it's very tight for N scale.
I was going to say an N scale. How long is like an 85-foot? I'd have to do the math. Probably about 5 inches.
So yeah, here's the key thing. It's only going on the part of my layout where there's nothing longer than 50 foot to serve. The longest car is 68 feet. We've got the stuff that goes to Oshkosh trucks that uses 89 feet flats, but I'm not going to be able to use 89 feet flats down here. So, it's important to think about what you're going to run down a Helix.
I got to say, you guys are really smart. My beta VCR still flashes midnight. Can you guys help me with that?
Give me a call, Dan. We'll hook you up.
Yeah.
Okay.
You need a fat pencil to rewind the tapes.
I got that.
Yeah.
Dude, you're not that old. Come on.
Me?
Unless you taped songs off of a radio by leaning a tape recorder up next to the stereo. You're not that old.
With a stereo cassette recorder, by the way.
Yeah.
I'm older than you think. Older than you think. Okay. All right, Brad. I think that was all the questions. I think we're near enough ready to start the clinics again. So, just to give us time to kill the stream, we're gonna because we need to kill it and restart it, which we said we'd do at 6 o'clock Eastern anyway. So we're going to do that in a wee sec. Just like to say thank you to tonight's panel. I think that's been a really good discussion. I think the topics that we've had tonight, we could do clinics on in their own right, and they will come in the future. There's thousands more clinics to come. So we'll cover those off in the future.